Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hey, guess what? I am headed to Lisbon. I am going to be teaching at Agora Lisboa, June 25th to the 28th, and I would love to see you there in Lisbon. If you live in Lisbon, if Lisbon is easy to get to, please come and practice with me at Agora Yoga in Lisbon. And today, my guests are two beautiful people, Sonia and Luis. They are a beautiful couple who are the founders of Agora Lisboa, which is a space dedicated to yoga, meditation, and the study of Buddhist philosophy, where practice is not a separate experience from how practitioners live their lives. It's really about integrating these philosophies into how you're living, and this is their focus. And they have a long, rich history with teachers like Richard Freeman, Mary Taylor, Chuck Miller, as well as Zen masters and Sufi masters and Sufi traditions and Tibetan Buddhism. And they have created this beautiful space, which I feel so blessed to be able to visit and offer classes and teach at. And we just were so aligned in how we view yoga and that space where discipline meets softness and structure meets inquiry, and where individual practice is united with true community. And so I cannot wait to get there and be in person with them. It's going to be such a beautiful experience, and I want you to be part of it. So if you're living in Portugal or Europe and you want to come and dive in to this amazing, beautiful event happening at Agora Yoga in Lisbon, then please come at the end of June and come say hi to us. And so in this episode, we're gonna really learn more about Sonia and Luis, their stories, and how they've set up their school. And you are going to love this rich episode and conversation about presence and connection, and also just the power of showing up for yourself, showing up on the mat, and persistence in coming back and starting again, looking again, coming back again, starting again. And so, without further ado, let's get started. Hello, welcome back. I am here with two beautiful beings of light, Sonia and Luis. How are you today?
Hello, Harmony. Very nice to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm being transported to Lisbon right now to be with you, cyberly.
Yes, getting a little pre-taste.
Yeah, I would love for you to talk. Maybe first, Sonia, I want you to introduce yourself to all of our listeners here, because you have an interesting story about encountering yoga when you were 18 years old. And I'd love for you to just share that a little bit. What brought you into this path where you are right now, running this beautiful school in Lisbon?
Yeah, I was born in France, in south of France. My mom is Brazilian and my dad is French. So I grew up already with a very multicultural background. And then I continued wanting to travel a lot and get to know the world. And when I was 18, I was in the States. Actually, I was studying there for a year. And I was dancing at the time. I did some dancing since I was a child. I was doing contemporary dancing. And then I stopped for a couple of years, and arriving in the States, I had this friend who just took me to yoga. Yeah, I think you would like it. You know, it looks like something you could you could like. And I just went to a first class. I mean, I did several styles of yoga at that stage. It's this first phase where you don't really know about
Of course.
it.
Yeah, you're just trying everything.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, this is cool. I like it. I feel good. Like, I think my first Shavasana, I was like, okay, something just happened. My nervous system went into a state of regulation it probably was needing for many years. And so I felt, okay, something there I need to explore. And then I continued since that day. I never stopped. And I went to many classes in Paris. And then I got acquainted a bit later, a couple of years later, with the Mysore style practice and Ashtanga taught in that form. And then I just stick to it for ever since. So it's been already some years. And it was at Ashtanga Yoga Paris first with
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was in Paris at Ashtanga Yoga Paris. Nice.
Yeah, it was Linda Monroe and Gerald Dis. And then I taught there. So, they really took me in and they also trained me in the Mysore room. And that was really special. And I thought I arrived in a place that was, just coming in the morning and having this sacred space every day and really feeling that there was a refuge, I guess, like a place for me to go to and to connect with myself and with my breath. And I thought being so young and like working already, and this was a real gift to already know this at such an early age, being like, okay, there is this place that we can connect to inside. So it's like those old habits that I think when you plant the seed, like really early on, then it just becomes really natural, like part of yourself. So I don't see myself doing anything else, although I was following a completely different path professionally.
What were you doing? Yeah.
I was working with international development. This is how we met with Luis, actually. So I had studied international relations and, humanitarian action, human rights. And I worked in that area, in that field for about maybe 4 years. I was doing first, I went to Africa and then I worked as a consultant, mainly in public health, the public health sector. But there was always this thing, like the reality that I was encountering on the field just had this weird, there was a little bit of, I just could not see the humans being aligned with what was going on or like the actions. So I was feeling there was something a little bit off. And I couldn't place myself really fully, like feeling in an honest or authentic place, staying in that field. Although the content or the topics were really interesting and I really enjoyed a lot of the work as well. So then I started to teach and then it just slowly became a bigger part of my life. And at some point they offered me this really amazing contract at the agency that we were working, which was the French government, basically. And it was this thing that, everybody would work so hard to get. And it was like, okay, here is the contract. You can work for us and travel the world and have this really good position. And I felt like very much in a dilemma, one of those times that you're like, what to do? I didn't sleep for a couple of weeks. And I asked my teacher, I wrote her this email that I remember very well. And I told her, what do I do, Linda? Should I take this opportunity? I want to teach yoga. I really love it. I really feel that it's a place that I resonate with more. But at the same time, I don't know if I can make a living out of it. I don't know if I can build my life around this practice and what to do. And she was very helpful at that time because she replied to me. She told me that she thought it was wonderful. I had this opportunity and, perhaps I should take it if it felt right. But that also she wanted to share that she felt I could really do a living with yoga, that she felt that it's true, lots of yoga teachers, lots of people studying, but that she could see that the practice had perhaps landed in a place that she thought I could share it in a more sustainable, long-term way. And then she also offered me a position at her studio as doing admin, like extra stuff, so I could have a little bit more of an income. So she really gave me that hand that I needed, this little push, this extra push. And then I refused the job And then that was it. I think from that point on, I just never looked back and I just continued on that path. And a few years later, I wanted to leave Paris for a while, actually. Just again, it's always I feel this shift happens when you feel is starting to feel off, like you start to complain about your life, or you start to feel like you're in this place that you're not really at ease, like your heart is telling you something, or the feeling that you connect with after your practice, for example, you lose the connection, like it's, quicker, or a little bit faster. I don't know if you see what I mean. You don't stay in that frequent. You're like, oh, you arrive in a place where you feel really, really balanced and really calm and peaceful. And then somehow the patterns or the things that you're involved with, like in your daily life, pull you away, and you feel that the external conditions are a bit too much to overcome because, of course, you're not enlightened. So like, you're very much being subjected to those external conditions. So this is where I realized, okay, another change needs to happen. And I went on traveling for about a year and a half. And I already knew at that point I wanted to settle in and open a shala somewhere after this travel. Like I was already thinking. And Lisbon was really on the top of my list because of, many reasons. I think, again, because I was here and I felt regulated. So
Yeah, you felt good. You're like, oh, it's beautiful, sunny.
yeah, and I didn't feel threatened in the streets. I didn't feel like there was also this peaceful environment. I think as a woman also coming with some difficult past stories and trauma and stuff. I mean, there was many things going on, but I felt really safe and light, and something in me opened kind of naturally. So I felt creative here as well. And okay, another big reason is that being Brazilian, I speak Portuguese. So I had the language already, which was a big.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's nice.
And that's it. Then along the way, we started to be together. We have a long story. So we already knew each other and we already had encounters before. But at that point during my travel, we decided, okay, we really want to live this story of being together. And I was like, do you want to come to Lisbon, Portugal, and move there with me?
So you were kind of like together, sort of dating, and you went off on your own traveling.
No,
actually, no. But we had met each other at the agency where we were working both, and we liked each other very much. But both of us were with different persons at that time. Okay. So when she left and she was traveling, I was following her through the newsletter. She had a newsletter, and then she sent me one newsletter, and I said, well, you can on your way back from, I don't know where you were, Thailand or something, you can stop over. I was living in Istanbul, in Turkey. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning, like resolving things that were open, unresolved. Yeah. And then, that was the beginning of our story. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Beautiful. Okay. Sorry. The beginning of this story. Beautiful. And you have a very unique story also, Luis, around like your practice of discovering Zen Buddhism and being in Japan and then living in Turkey. Yeah. Can you share with us what brought you into this spiritual field? Because I think you focus mainly on meditation, but...
Yeah, so I focus on freedom. Freedom,
thank you, yes.
But it's true that for the Buddhist dharma, it's where I found most of the tools that I use. But I also practice yoga. I'm a beginner, but I've been practicing since we started to be together. Yeah. I realized that it was very important and for Sonia, and I wanted to understand more. And so I started practicing. So there is a communication between the two of them. But if I go back to my story, I was born in Colombia. I'm Colombian as well. I was born and raised in Colombia. And then I went to France when I was turning 18. And so I was raised in Colombia, but I became an adult in Europe and in France specifically. And so when I was 20, I went to Japan as an exchange student. And there I was completely fascinated by the beauty of the temples in Japan. So that was how my connection with Buddhism was, through beauty. Actually, it was not really so much anything else. It was just that I would spend hours and hours just staying there at the temples and wondering about how the monks would move, and the gardens, the stone gardens, and the beautiful temples. And so I started to try to understand how that had come to happen. And then I found meditation. So I started to meditate while I was living in Japan, and I got some basic information. I didn't actually had some training back then from people.
I'm curious about that. Like you're in these beautiful gardens, and like you just were sort of like, I'm going to sit down and meditate. Like, how did you?
I think actually we all have a connection with something that, in a way, we have a longing for inner peace. All of us, and so inner peace is not something Buddhist or Christian or yogic. It's just our longing. We want to have a sense of belonging to a place where we're not pushed by reactivity in our heads and in our bodies. So basically, I think that was what got me there, because I felt extremely calm and peaceful. And no one was pushing me around. I could spend the whole day in the temple and just enjoying beauty. I found myself just enjoying life. So that was the beginning. But the technical part, because there's a technique to meditation, it's a method actually. I started to get it with a book called The 3 Pillars of Zen. And it's a great classic of Zen Buddhism. And it was a teacher at the university where I was doing my exchange that recommended the book. So I started to just, there's some drawings and some photos. And so I started to sit, and I forced myself to the lotus, which I don't recommend to anyone, but I was like really forcing myself, and I was 20, so I could make it, get out with it, and that's how I started to do that meditation, that physical part. And then I went on with my life. I finished studies, and I started to work at this agency where we met. But I did stay there for a longer period of time. I stayed there for 10 years. So I worked, and weirdly enough, because people who know me now or who just meet me now have a hard time imagining that. But I was wearing suits and tie and being sharp and computer and doing financial models. And I was in finance. I was working in the same agency, but I was in finance. So I had to negotiate really big loans of hundreds of millions of euros, and I had to travel the world. That was part of my job. And as with Sonia, I agreed, there were parts which were extremely enjoyable and very interesting. But through all those 10 years, I always felt a bit divided, sort of scattered. Like I couldn't bring myself forward as just who I was completely, fully. And I was playing sort of personas, masks. But I was still doing meditation. I was meditating the whole time.
Like waking up early and doing your meditation practice?
I'm a morning person. So I would always have like a little space where I had a little Buddha, I had a space. And so I would just meditate on my own. But during 12 years, I was basically meditating on my own. Wow. And that's an important thing for me because I understood that one could be extremely deluded by being alone. So I almost thought around the year 12 that I was this close to enlightenment, Of course, there was no one checking, but in my mind, it made sense,
It's so interesting to me that you were just sort of getting up and meditating by yourself. Were you reading some books?
Yeah, so I was always reading books on Buddhism, and Zen Buddhism was really interesting for me. And I was meditating, but I was also reading lots of poetry. And when I was living in Turkey, that became even a wider spread because I was interested in Sufism, Of course, there's lots of Sufism in Istanbul. I was living there. But throughout all those 12 years of practice, I was basically reading a lot, reading, and then meditating, and then trying to understand what was meditation. And then I was also doing retreats alone in a very sort of self-made way. I decided after a hard breakup, which are really great, actually. Those are moments where it's awful from the experience of emotions, but it's just great fuel. You have this will to move, to do something different. You cannot just stay, The crises are amazing. They have this power of transformation. And yeah, so I was just doing that. And while I was living in Istanbul, I decided, okay, it's been a long time that I've been doing this alone. How about we go on? I sometimes would go and go to temples or to dojos and had my posture checked, but I wouldn't, because I thought I have this. I have my personal development. I can do this. I can get to the top of it, and which actually in a way it's a very individualistic and very capitalistic way of thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's just about self in a way, which I found out it's actually the contrary. It's not about self at all, and. So when I was in Turkey, I Googled it. I Googled where to meditate around where I live.
Okay.
2 places came up. I mean, it's a Muslim country, of course. And one place was really far away, and one place was 15 minutes from my house. Of almost 20 million people living in Istanbul, there were only 2 places. I mean,
Wow.
you have to imagine. So I went to this place and I met who became my teacher, a very original, half crazy, I would say, man who was teaching in a tiny studio, which was actually his living room in his apartment, which was a basement apartment, completely humble and simple. Sonia saw it. You would go inside for the classes, you would leave your stuff on his bed, go through the kitchen, and actually this is the meditation studio, yeah, but it was just his living room that he had cleared, and in sort of a basement, was damp and very dark. It was cold in winter, but somehow it was amazing. It was,
Yeah.
And so eventually I met the Sangha there, the community, which is a great thing because I became more, with the Sangha, what happens with people is that people introduce you to parts of yourselves that you don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
So you can think that you're very sharp and clever and then you got this, but you don't know until you actually live with other people. And yeah, so that's what happened. And then eventually, so that was 10 years ago. Then there's a connection with Sonia. Sonia came in from Thailand. And I was in a severe work problem with my boss at that time. And I was in burnout. And I decided, okay, I need to stop. So, Sonia helped me a lot to go for that as well. It's like crises are great because it's like the universe has a conspiracy to help you move. It's not to put you down. In the moment, it seems to put you down, but it's actually like you don't need to stay there. So we're giving you energy. We're making it very clear that you need to move. And
I love that perspective. I just want to highlight that because I think it's such a beautiful shift for people to really take note of, because our initial instinct is always life isn't working for me and this is really terrible, or nothing's working out, or everything's gone. I'm, at my lowest low. And I love what you're saying is if you can kind of develop more of a relationship of trust,
yes,
and using that energy. It's I think our lives, sometimes we build up these, just speaking energetically, our relationships become kind of points of fixation in a way.
Yeah.
For example, just based on what we'd been talking about. And so we're cultivating all this energy within the relationship, and it could be with your job or your partner or any relationship that we have, and everything in our lives is relationships. Yes. And so all these little fixation points are kind of there energetically. And what you're saying, which I think is so true and so beautiful, is that when it opens or, rips apart, depending on how you want to look at it, it frees up all of this energy that then can move and really catapult you into something totally different,
yes,
totally new, into a different stage or phase or environment or place within yourself. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing. You've said it twice, and I think it's worth just really hitting home because it's so true. And it's easy to get depressed and down and feel
And it's also great to have exactly in those moments of crisis, once you already have those tools, like some contemplative practices, to be able to know that this is the one thing that you can hold on and not let it go. Because there's also this temptation, like at these moments of like big turmoil and uncertainty, we also have this lack of trust sometimes in our own practices, whether it's meditation or yoga asana or whatever it is. And so if we can stick to that, I remember during the terrorist attacks in Paris, and that was already 20 years. No, that was like,
I don't know.
No, that was maybe 10 years
15
ago,
perhaps,
15 years ago. Yeah, anyways, that was a while ago. I remember that it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Yeah, I was in Paris, and I remember that we kept the shala open and everybody was closing, like, because it's like we're mourning. And I remember that we decided to keep the shala open, and there was a teacher there, and that was very important in those times, that there was a place to go to and to continue and to work with whatever will come up in terms of emotions and thoughts and processes, and just be able to witness, so that there is always a little bit of a step back, a distance that we can take from.
And there is one thing about crisis, is that if you look into the etymology of crisis, it's a very interesting thing, because it comes from an ancient Greek word. And the word comes from a verb, and the verb is related to a turning point. So if you go to a crossroad and you have to take either right or left, so it was used in medicine in ancient Greece to determine that time of the disease where either there's a remission or there's an aggravation. And doctors have to be really careful for that moment to provide the support needed for the remission to happen, And so the crisis itself was not a bad thing. It was not considered to be a bad thing. It only became, in our current language, sort of bad term around the 18th century and 19th century. But before, it was actually, crisis was a moment of truth, where something is going to be decided, and it's either going to be really good remission or it's going to be aggravation. But you can work on that moment if you're careful enough.
Beautiful. Okay, so back to your crisis.
So my crisis actually got me to a place, and I think I had lots of support. Love is a great support.
Yeah.
And I decided to leave behind status, money, basically. I was earning lots of money there, and I was having like a career. I could have stayed there still. And it was very, very well paid, and there was a status about it. The diplomatic work is like the kind of work that anyone would like and love. And so I decided in that realm, in that realm. Not that people don't choose something else, but it was. I remember when I decided to stop, everyone's like, "You're throwing down the toilet." Heaven for most of the people in this world. But then you realize also that in crisis, you have to follow. You walk a little bit without knowing where you're walking. You take a step without feet somehow. There's a leap of faith, and you don't know. I didn't know. And by the way, I didn't know if it would work out between us. We didn't know, neither of us. And then I never followed anyone in my life until then. It was very sort of, because I got this, right? I'm near enlightenment. And then I called Sonia, because it was her choice to come to Lisbon. Quite a good choice, by the way. I love it here. But it was scary. I was changing work. I was also with someone else. So I was changing relationships.
Yeah.
And I was starting to do something that I had never done, because like Sonia, who was already teaching, I was trained by my teacher in Turkey, but I had only given one class. So it was pretty scary. It was pretty like, wow, you don't know where you're putting your feet on, where you're stepping on. And that was 7 years ago, when we created Agora, basically. And ever since, what I've been stepping on is also this world of discovery of things that are not what I know. And ever sort of starting circle of not knowing and discovering. And and I like that, to have those three sentences in mind. There's a Buddhist teacher used to say, I don't know, I don't understand, I don't own. So I started doing yoga 7 years ago because I was so impressed by how Sonia would just float, And I would do some stuff and it was more like an elephant, and she was like a cat, like a very gracious cat. And I really like that. How can I do that? So that was what got me into yoga. But now I've discovered so much. And now I'm really very happy to build both practices within me. And that's what we do. That's basically, we build bridges between practices that very often are very oblivious of one another. I have friends in the Buddhist world that think that yoga is some sort of acrobatics. We would never do that. And people in yoga who don't consider meditation truly for what it is.
They would sit for 5 minutes at the end of their asana practice. Yeah.
And of course, Buddhism, which is the last thing, is that I'm interested in meditation, but I'm much more interested in Buddhism itself. It's because what I'm interested about is freedom. And so meditation can be a tool for that, but it has to have a larger context.
I love hearing that. And I want to ask you some questions too, just about, it's so interesting, your experience of coming to yoga later after having, meditated for so many years. But it's not dissimilar even from my own story, because I really entered yoga through Buddhism as well and through Buddhist practice. And that's where I was initially very drawn, especially to Buddhist philosophy and teachings. I was in university, did a honors paper and degree, went to China, studied with all these monks in different monasteries there, and wrote a paper about meditation, because that's what I was interested in, was Buddhist meditation, of course. And I was developing that practice like you, not for as long before yoga, because I was familiar with yoga as well. But it was really the meditation practice that I noticed, oh, this is really powerful. Going in, not moving, witnessing my thoughts, being with my breath, and just having that as a foundation. And then all of the Buddhist teachings as well really resonated with just my soul, I think. And when I came into yoga, the practice sort of helped me feel more connected in my body, in my physical body, and kind of brought this awareness to my body in a very different way. And also maybe a little bit more of a calm feeling in the mind. But what I also kind of noticed was the Yoga Sutras, which I studied fairly intensely over the last 20 years, really is aligned with Buddhist philosophy. And I've even, read many books about how they're the same. And my one teacher, Sri O.P. Tiwari, who was also the teacher of Gerard and Linda as well at Ashtanga Yoga Paris, would always talk about how the Buddhists and the yogis actually were together doing their practices. And all of this philosophy around the very traditional yoga and the Buddhist teachings were the same and coming up together. Mm-hmm. And when you read the Yoga Sutras from a Buddhist lens, it's saying the exact same thing. And when I went to my first Vipassana retreat in the line of asana Goenkaji, it was amazing, because all of his teachings at night over those 10 days is basically Yoga Sutras. Yeah. In Pali language. And so you're listening to him and you're like, oh, that's that sutra. Oh, that's that sutra. But he's teaching from the Buddhist perspective, from traditional Buddhist texts and from, his practice. And so I feel like there's just a beautiful marriage there in these traditions, more so than even Hinduism and yoga, because yoga isn't really so aligned with traditional Hindu stories and teachings and all of that. It's much more aligned with this Buddhist idea that, everything's changing and there is no deity that's going to come and save you, basically. So it's just really interesting. And so I'm curious, what did the last 7 years of being in your body and coming into this Ashtanga yoga practice, how do you feel it's connected some dots for you with the meditation practice?
Yeah, what you've said, I can completely agree. It's really finding that it's, in the end, freedom is neither Buddhist or yogic. It's just what it is. When you're interested in freedom from pain, which is the main idea of the Buddha, the main quest of the Buddha, then there are several ways of doing that. And I found that the yogic path, by the way, the Buddha, you read the text, the ancient Buddhist text, and he was a yogi. It's just that he was not practicing because the yoga was not standard in the way it is nowadays, but he was a yogi.
Yeah, there was no Buddhism before Gautama Buddha. Exactly. There was only yoga.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I found is just a very interesting part, sort of sibling way of looking at things from not even a different perspective. It's just sometimes it complements each other, because one thing that I've learned from what Sonia's been teaching me and other teachers of Sonia have been teaching me in the yoga realm is that through the body, through embodied practices, you can also access spaces of immense freedom in your mind. And that's actually what interests me the most. It's freedom in the mind, freedom from what makes us suffer, freedom from conditioning, habitual patterns of suffering, repetition over and over again. And so there's this way with the yogic practices that I've learned from Ashtanga that I've learned, is you repeat, but you pay attention each time. So you're paying little details. So maybe you're observing your habitual patterns, but because you're paying attention, then something shifts in your mind. And that shifting in your mind, it's shifting in the body as well, but something's also shifting in the mind. And the body's doing something, but the mind is understanding something that could be in a very different dimension. You could be understanding patterns of suffering that are completely unrelated to what's visually available, that have to do with your childhood, with your relationship with family and so forth. And so when you come after that and you sit and you're meditating, it all sort of informing each other. And the other way around as well, when you're practicing ethics, which is a pillar of Buddhist practice, it has lots of sense of how you move, not only in your body, but how you move with your words, how you move with your actions with people. So you become aware more and more that in the end, it's not so unrelated. And I do agree with you in the last point that I found that Buddhism and the Yoga Sutras are very much connected. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the ethical part is just Buddhist ethics. It's like really very clearly connected to it. And I myself, I came to the point where I found out one day, hey, I'm a Buddhist yogi. Yeah, because I know that yoga nowadays is very much connected to the Hindu sort of culture. But yoga itself is a word that could be used in so many different contexts. Yoga in Tibet is so different. And they are doing practices with their body, tumo, So I found it incredibly humbling also for me, and it's not been easy because I've been resisting. No, it's meditation, Buddhist is my thing. You don't know what you do. It's just acrobatics, so I've had to overcome this conditioning in my mind, and I've been really very helpful to have a teacher.
Yeah. Have you been taking up a meditation practice, Sonia?
Yes. Not as much as Luis was doing the Mysore really consistently. Now that we have kids, it just changed it, but a little bit. But this is temporary. But he was there like every morning, every Mysore practice. So I cannot say that I was like as committed as he was, but I also did, implement a meditation practice and also a dharma study, like joining a Buddhist sangha and joining retreats and doing all of that. And I was going to compliment on what you were saying, that I think that there is essentially both traditions are trying, or both systems are studying the nature of the mind and how this creates suffering and how can we move away from that suffering. But perhaps when we look at those systems with our more Western minds or limited minds, not necessarily from the Western perspective, but we are spontaneously, or we're separating the mind from the body, from the spirit. We are thinking the mind is this isolated thing. Therefore, we think of Buddhism and meditation as something working on the mind, perhaps, and then that yoga is working on the body primarily, or maybe the prana, maybe the energy moving through the body. And I think this is where there is this big kind of mistake that is made on the first approach that we have to those traditions. And then when you actually realize that body and mind are not separate, and you start to get a sense of it through your practice. And I think this is where practices that use up the whole of our bodies and all of the ways that we can perceive, that we can get those perceptions. So including the mind as a sense as well, but then all of the other senses, then we take the mind and we take it down the pedestal a little bit so that we make it part of our reality just as much as the breath, or just as much as something that we're feeling here or there, or that is moving. And so we can also get a new perspective on how to free ourselves from the suffering produced by the mind, because then it becomes something that, as you were saying, we can change, we can ease around, we can soften into. So it's not this kind of very rigid thing like the mind being up there in our head or something like that. So
I like what you're saying. And I think that's such an important awareness to integrate into ourselves. And it's a challenging one because we like to have little boxes that we can put things into and say, well, this is good for that and this is good for that. And it just like simplifies our life, right? It creates shortcuts in our nervous system and our mind that we can say, okay, I'm going to meditate for my mind. I'm going to do asana, for my body. And then I'm going to like eat good food for my health and my body or whatever, right? And what you're saying, I think, is so important also to just realize our mind isn't just like in our head or like out here somewhere in our field. It's in our body too. And it's very much like throughout our body. Consciousness is in every cell of our system. And so awakening is not just something that happens like up here in our brains or like above our brains or wherever. It happens through our entire being. And and I just think it's really helpful to like keep in mind they're not separate. You can't do something physically without that affecting also your mind, your emotions, your consciousness, your awareness. And you can't do something good for your emotions or your mind or your consciousness and that not also affect your physicality as well.
Yeah. It's just like those boundaries are just, we put them everywhere, right? We like to separate things, like in general, just like what is practice and what is not practice. So we're like, okay, I did my practice. I didn't do my practice. I did my practice and then I can be a jerk for the rest of the day, or like, do whatever else thing, or, I didn't do it. So then it's bad or something like that. This weekend, Luis was away. And so I couldn't do my practice because I was full on with the twins. But then at some point, I think it was day 2, I was in the room with one of our boys and I was rocking him to put him to bed and I was counting, like inhale and rising the count and I was exhaling double the count. And I was like, and this was just so soothing. And I came out of the room and I'm like, okay, I did my pranayama practice. And it really, but it was a little twist, like a little way that life shows you, like if you're able to pay attention, that there is no separation. Everything is an opportunity to practice. Every moment is a moment to take a deep breath in, and I think that this is oftentimes what we use as an entry when we are communicating to our students or our audience, or, how do we bridge traditions? And we have met along our path also some skepticism, like some people kind of pointing at the separateness of it, like, in terms of ontologically, philosophically, like these are different traditions. We need to, separate. We need to, and of course, we don't want to make this kind of soup, right? We are not trying to make like this new agey mix of everything together, but there is a truth that lies a little bit behind all that at the core. And I think the breath is something we use very often as a way to connect and to bridge.
And I also think that the fact that we do it ourselves is just proof enough that it does work, I mean, people may be skeptical, but from experience, I can tell that it's extremely beneficial to do both, to have that. As Chuck Miller used to say, who says very often, both is better.
Both is better. Yes. And
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is it's not about segregating and separating. Yoga is union. Yoga is the integration. And yoga isn't something that belongs to a tradition or a culture or a specific, nationality or ethnicity. I mean, it has roots. The word, yes, yoga has roots in India because it's a Sanskrit word and that's the land of Sanskrit. But Buddhism also has roots in India, interestingly enough, right? It comes from India. It has all of the same roots. It comes out of yoga, as we know. But yoga, this idea of union or freedom, because that is also the goal of yoga, is freedom. Kaivalya is to recognize the oneness, the aloneness, is human. And, there's been Christian traditions, Sufi traditions, Muslim traditions. There's been pagan traditions, indigenous traditions, all of these different cultures and ethnicities and lineages and traditions. The human path, in my mind, is always leading to this goal of freedom and integration and union. And so, of course, there's different tools that different cultures have come up with to help them have this experience.
Yeah.
But it's not like only one culture on the planet in all of history ever was like, there's a state that's beyond suffering. I mean, as far as I know, every human has suffered. Being human is suffering. And so that's the whole journey, is how to integrate yourself to the point where there's not even freedom from suffering, freedom from the desire or the attachment to not be suffering.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's the journey. And that's what Buddhism teaches. It's what yoga teaches. It's not actually about escaping the suffering. And I think a lot of spiritual practitioners get that wrong. Like, oh, when I'm enlightened, I won't suffer anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, if you kind of read between the lines, it's about not being attached or not having the desire.
And I think that the beautiful teaching also of the Gita. I mean, my main teachers for the last over 10 years now are Mary Taylor and Richard Freeman, and been with them a lot. And I think they were the first one that gave me permission to really dive into Buddhism.
They've done a beautiful job of blending them, for sure.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm so relieved. Because I was still quite young in the way of thinking of things. And I remember telling Luis, like, okay, if we're going to be together and we're going to have a project together, like these are our teachers, we need to go see them together. And we did. But they had this book on the Gita, When Love Comes to Light.
When Love Comes to Light.
It's amazing. It's a real beautiful commentary, a really beautiful reading of that, of how we have this opportunity to, I mean, we always have agency. So we are always engaged in the world. We are always making decisions. Everything that we do or that we refrain from doing is a decision, is a choice. And that being the teaching of the Gita, that behind this, there is this love as the most important thing that should guide us and that we can connect to within ourselves if we are willing to peel the layers of our conditioned mind. And I think it's so relevant today to think about our role in communities and in society in that way, that we're not practicing to escape or suffering that is going on, or to numb ourselves, or to not feel so much that suffering, but actually to be able to stay grounded and in the present moment, and to be able to witness and to act and to make decisions and to do our own role, whatever this is, which is going to be different for every individual, but to do it fully, like gracefully, with as much awareness and as much a clear mind as we can possibly develop or keep inquiring into, so that we are a little bit more ready to act from that place, perhaps.
Yeah, I think also the word that you said, communities, makes lots of sense. Because there is a tendency in our civilization towards individualism, and it's very much aggravated by our economic system, whereby we think that we get this. If I have enough resources for my own, then I'll just I'll crack open the problems of life. I'll just solve it. And to me, it really makes lots of sense nowadays to think in terms of community when it comes to the practice, because we can get ego-centered when we start practicing for a time and we start to think that it is about self-improvement. And I think that's a danger. And being within a community of people who are trying to work their way beyond reactivity in their minds as best as they can, having peers, but also having people you look up to, people who have more experience than you have. It's really crucial to avoid just this loneliness. Because it seems like a place of power, but it's also a very lonely place. And you could be extremely deluded. Like I was 12 years into meditation, just about to become a Buddha. And then I came across the community and I realized, wow, I'm not at all just about to become a Buddha. And so I've been we have this sangha, which is actually, I think, is another way of viewing freedom as human beings. Freedom, this path of freedom, is not possible without community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really,
Yeah. And I love that in Buddhism, right? The triple gem. You have like the enlightenment or the enlightened one or the revealer or the example,
yeah,
the Buddha and the Dharma, the teachings and what you're bringing into life, and then the Sangha, the community. And I think
absolutely.
you need all three because otherwise, yeah, you're kind of living in a delusion. And also, we're creatures who are in relationship.
Yes.
And we can't see ourselves clearly. We only see ourselves clearly in relationship.
And the more diverse the relationships are, the better. So the more
Yeah.
diverse the sangha is, the better. So it's,
The
I
more
think
people
this
are
is
not agreeing with you, it's
not
also,
agreeing from different origins, from different cultures, from different background, because then the tension, the dialogue that's being created, it's even richer. It comes from like, and when we both have two cultures, so we already come with that understanding that, oh yeah, this is like this from that perspective, but this is like this from another perspective. And so, but I think that here it's also a beauty of Lisbon is that it's a place where a lot of people meet from different areas and different backgrounds. But we are also trying to work on how to make our community more accessible, not just in terms of where people come from in the world, but also like what kind of social level, like in society. And I think this is something also to be worked on. Yeah.
In the end, all of this is maybe related. There's a quote of one of my Buddhist friends and teachers. He says often, it's not possible to be an island of happiness in an ocean of misery. It's really, truly not possible.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, that's where compassion really is the enlightened state, right? Yeah. Okay, before we go, and I just want you to speak a little bit about Agora Lisboa, where I'm so excited to be coming in the summer to teach some of your students and to meet you guys in person and see your two lovely little boys. But this term Agora, I love how you talk about it having all these different meanings, like in Greek and Portuguese and Sanskrit. Can you talk a little bit about why you called your yoga center Agora Lisboa?
We were looking for a name that would be easy for different cultures, for different people to relate to. So it was a bit tricky because we didn't want an English name. We didn't want a name that would be only Portuguese. So there was a bit of that, I think. And then my dad is a philosophy professor. And so I was always very much in touch with some Greek concepts and some of that, the mythology, but also a bit more like those instances of thinking, of exchanging, of democracy, so the Greek ancient city in a way was in some place in my imagination. So I think this is how one day Agora popped up, and I was feeling really resonating with it because it means now in Portuguese. So it's just really...
Atta in Sanskrit.
Yeah, exactly. Atta in Sanskrit. And it was really perfect. And then, of course, you have different spellings for the Sanskrit one, the Agora, which is the A is being the prefix. So it's like the contrary of dark and evil. And so it's actually more light and opened. And it's also the name of a tantric sect in India. And I think that with Luis, there is also something that unites us, is that we always try to go a little bit at the margin of how things are done. And I kind of also related to that, just to that reference. Of course, we are not agoris, properly speaking. Thankfully, probably for the people around us, because those practices are quite intense, the agora practices. But at least do try to think a little bit out of the box in many ways in our lives. And so this tantric reference was also something that spoke to us. And the agora in Greek, of course, is this place of meeting and connection and the space that people can share in. And that was always the intention, that it wouldn't be a yoga studio, that it would be a place where practices could develop and community could develop and where people could share and meet. So that included yoga practice, but also included meditation and Buddhism, and also included other things. We have therapies happening at Agora, and we have many different kinds of community gatherings and events. We also liked to pick a name that wouldn't be like just one tradition or one thing. And we're so happy that you're coming.
Yes, I know. At the end of June 25th, I think, to the 28th. So
yes, for Louis' birthday, you'll be here for Louis' birthday.
What's your birthday?
Great gift. Yeah.
Yeah, is it June? When in June is it?
27th.
The 27th. I'm 21st.
Oh, for your birthday too.
Wonderful.
We can celebrate together. Beautiful. Tell everyone where they can come find you if they're in Lisbon, or reach out to you if they're looking for you and they're planning their trip. Sure.
We have Instagram accounts that you can find, Agora Lisboa. We have a website. It's also Agora, and then this little -lisboa.com. Yeah, there is an Instagram that is also more specifically talking about the Lisbon Buddhist Center. So the activities that are happening on the Buddhist section of Agora. And yeah, I think you can find most of the information, and your information is going to be there as well. It's already there. It's on the website and it's on the Instagram page. So people can already register, and people have started to sign up already. So that's wonderful.
I'm so excited to come see you and be in Lisbon, I can see why you moved there. It's a magical little city.
Absolutely. Very sunny right now. We're blessed with sun. Nice weather.
We are.
Well, it's still snowing here in Canada.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories. It's so beautiful to meet you both. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder that I'll be in Lisbon June 25th to the 28th for this beautiful intensive. Please come. There'll be Mysore classes in the morning, as well as different workshops, dharma as alignment, integrating body, breath, and awareness. Saturday, it will be Beyond Asana, the energetic anatomy of yoga. And Sunday, the secrets of yoga, the union of Shiva and Shakti. This is going to be a beautiful, rich experience. Lots of philosophy, lots of embodiment, lots of breath, lots of going into the more esoteric aspects of the process of yoga and union and waking up to the truth of who and what you are. So I can't wait to see you there. Registration is now open. You can find it on the website Agora-Lisboa, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.